Welcome back. Godly Finances in Small Bites. We left you off last time talking about the importance of starting a budget. So if you are still here, first of all, good on you. Keep up the good work. Second of all, we want to make sure that you start that journey with a really sound start. And so we've got a tip for you today that can really help you out to that end. I want to start in the Bible, and we're going to read in Luke 19, and this is the parable of the 10 minas. So I've selected a few verses here that I think really relate well to the material that we want to present today. And in the end, I'm going to kind of connect the dots between the material and the scriptures, and I want to leave you with two main devotional takeaways. A man of noble birth went to a distant country to have himself appointed king and then to return. So he called 10 of his servants and gave them 10 minas. "Put this money to work," he said, "until I come back." I'm going to skip down a little bit. Then he sent for the servants to whom he had given the money in order to find out what they had gained with it. Now, what happens after this is an account of what happened with the servants and their money, and some of them good, some not so good. I think that you've probably read the story. I'm going to skip down to verse 23. "Why then didn't you put my money on deposit, so that when I came back, I could have collected it with interest?" Now, I know that this may not make sense right away, but like I said, in the end, we'll circle back to this and we'll leave you with some key takeaways that relate to the material. Today's episode is all about tracking. Tracking is the first step that you're going to take towards having a successful budget. And it's an exercise in discipline and in diligence. Tracking is important because it gives us a complete picture of everything that happened in the previous month. We need that sober evaluation, something that's reliable, so that we can go back and we can figure out exactly how we did. Tracking means everything. We're talking about every red cent here. This idea of a mental receipt or I've got it in my head, those things are fallacies. Do away with those. Somebody wiser than me once said, anything measured improves. And I think that we could probably take the opposite approach and we could say that if we don't measure it, it's not likely to improve. Tracking has an immediate value, and that is that we can put together, we can kind of reconstruct everything that happened in the previous month. And actually, if you can't do that, if you can't account for every red cent from the previous month, including credit card purchases, it's actually a pretty good indication that something is wrong. True tracking doesn't allow for these big nebulous personal spending budgets or burn money. We need to be able to identify exactly what happened with every transaction, what we spent and where we spent it. All right, I think we've kind of beaten the horse to death here. I think that you get the idea. This is going to be an exercise that's tedious, and actually it's probably going to be a little bit painful, but it is going to be an exercise in this critical step towards figuring out the truth. Jesus tells us in John 8 that the truth is an instrument of freedom. Just think about this. In 1 month from now, you could be in a place where you are telling your money exactly where it needs to go before it's even come in and before you've even spent it, as opposed to kind of hastily chasing things around at the end and trying to figure out where it all went. This can be an instrument of freedom for you. And here's a tip. As you begin this journey, you don't want to design a budget around the way that you're currently spending money. Don't design around your current spending habits. What you want to do is make sure that your budget is a function of your income and where you stand in life. Ideally, this can be done from a blank slate. And slowly but surely, you can take small steps of righteousness, and you can find yourself down the road in a modified budget where debt isn't even part of it. It's history. It's a thing of the past. Imagine how awesome that would feel. Now, I want to go back to these scriptures. We've talked about tracking and we've talked about how important it is, but what can we take away from the scriptures as it relates to that? Well, this time I want to work backwards. So I'm going to begin with verse 23. Let me read it again. "Why then didn't you put my money on deposit so that when I came back, I could have collected it with interest?" The lesson that I learn from this verse is a subtle one, and it revolves around the personal pronoun my. Jesus could have said anything there. But the point that he makes is, this is his money. It's not our money. And I think that if we recognize this critical point that we are stewards of what we have been given, and the fact that we have money that does not belong to us, that it belongs to Jesus, I think that it would really change our mind in the approach that we have towards it and the way that we spend it. We have to remember that we are stewards. Now, let me go back up. And this is what it says in verse 15. Then he sent for the servants to whom he had given the money in order to find out what they had gained with it. To find out what they had gained, or to find out, that's first century for accounting. It's clear that Jesus has an expectation that when he gives something to be entrusted to somebody else, that there is this expectation of an account for what was done with that. This is first century accounting. There's no, I've got it in my head, or I think that it works out to this, or gaps in our spending. There's a solid account for everything that was given to this servant. And so I encourage you, let's be like these righteous servants that have an honest and excellent account for what they have been given. You can do this. Stick with it. Don't get discouraged. We've got a bunch of material heading your way, and we're going to walk step by step and piece by piece through the steps of a budget. Keep up the good work. But for now, get busy with tracking last month, and we'll see you soon.